we talk about a Markdown language and the role it plays in the daily work, right? In terms of any open source contribution or daily work, if you are working on the code base or the GitHub repositories. So what roles it plays, what are the contributions around that, and how someone can easily upskill without knowing much around the syntax part of the Markdown language itself. So for someone who are never know like what is Markdown language, you would be seeing some things in the GitHub. If you go to any open source repo in any of the GitHub repository, for example, this one is from the CloudFormation linter to lint your code to make the right indentation, to check the validation of the code, and you could see a clear documentation on the repo itself, which is completely written using Markdown language. Same way, there is one more sample repository which is for the AWS CLI. So you are using CLI commands, which is again available in the public GitHub repository, and how to use, how to install, everything being documented for user easiness, adaptation purpose, and again those kind of things also written in the Markdown language. So again, going for the Terraform, there are multiple providers available outside. Even the official providers like AWS also have their open public repository, and there are like n number of open sourced provider from third party as well. And all those repositories also will be having a common readme file to instruct consumers if someone wants to use their contribution or get to know like what does piece of code does or from where to start exploring. So all those details will be get documented as a readme file, and the readme instruction is written with a language called Markdown language. It's not just limited with the documentation of the GitHub repository. It's also used in multiple places like a blog post. If you are committing a Git repository commit, or if you are doing a pull from one branch to another to leave a message, or if you are doing a review for the branches, there also you can use this Markdown language to express your thoughts. Modern note-taking tools like Notion, it also gives you options to take your notes in the Markdown language syntax, so that you don't need to go like use your mouse, go to multiple places and search like, okay, I'm typing a header, so the font size this should be this, or the it should be in bold, italic, I need to go and search for the icons and get it changed. Rather, we can use the Markdown language to get it changed, to get it formatted. So one of the examples is the very famous Dev.to, which also supports the Markdown language. I can directly choose Markdown language and start using that syntax to get it done. So if you're committing for a open source project and you want to get a pull request raised so that a contribution can be get merged to it, then people would expect clear debrief instruction like what your code does, so that it don't end up breaking it, and what is the purpose of it. So all those clear description you can write it over here in the Markdown language. It supports, you can link hyperlink, you can use images and more. It's being get supported over here. As I was mentioning, like modern note-taking tools like Notion, it also supports Markdown language, so you can type on the go and get the heading part, or you can get a title part and go more handy part, right? So now we saw the use case. Now we saw like what it does. So how it is, before going to like how it is done, we can see like one of the extension we use is a Markdown all-in-one. But before going into that piece of part, let's see like how it would look, right? So generally all the Markdown language are written in .md file. So your file extension should end with .md in it. And if you're using an extension like the code editor like VSCode, then it also provides you the preview screen. So if you're writing in a Markdown language, if I'm doing like it's a heading, then how it would actually look like. So those things would be also provided in the preview screen, so that when you make to the GitHub repository, you can get visualization how it is going to be visible for the end user before even you push it to the repository or writing it in the blog post. So now as you could see, there are multiple options, right? But generally you will type a heading as a single hash, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5 has like the more hash been appended to that. And so as you could see in the screen, I add more hash, the font size gradually gets decreased. You can also create ordered list, unordered list, or ordered list, and you can also create tables, you can create hyperlink, you can create images injected to it as part of the page. So whatever you could see in the fancy repository, everything can be achieved using the Markdown part. So now there can be the question comes, which is how to remember all the syntax, because it's more of a documentation part, right? So VS Code has an extension called all Markdown. This is the extension which I generally use. So if you are going with this, you can achieve everything whatever you want to do using the command prompt. So if I do a command shift P in Windows, it would be like Windows shift P, and you can search for Markdown all-in-one, and it's going to give you the options like what you want to do. For example, if I want to write a text in italic format, so if I want to type it in, I need a, let's say I need a bold one. So you get the idea, right? So same way for the table part. So if you search for table, then you're going to get a table. Also, like you also have options like table with headers and a normal table part. So this is one thing, like how it can be helpful when you want to do it in terms of documenting it. And in case if you want to explore how it is used in the real world, then the best way to do is go to the GitHub repository and search for the open source repository which is available, right? So for example, we saw about CloudFront linter, which is CFN lint, and the readme content is getting populated from the specific file called readme.md. So by default, Git is going to show whatever content you are providing in the readme.md as part of the documentation of the repository. So in case if you want to know like, okay, how this line's been populated or how this hyperlink has been given, you can directly view the readme.md as a raw file. So you can see it as a code instead of preview. Then you can try to relate like, okay, so hash is for this and this is syntax used for putting an image, and so these are the notes, they left it out for internal documentation, and this is for the heading part. So it's not just for this specific repository. Any open source repository, you do it in the internet, then you would see it. So why I'm flagging this is like, because for our portfolio, we create our own repository, we host it in the GitHub to maintain our own repository, right? But then we can't explain to each individual person like what our code does or how they can consume our open source contribution. So then try to keep it as a best practice. Whenever you create a repository, also create a Markdown language or the Markdown file, readme.md, as part of it, and try to document as you go. People use multiple as part of it. There are also like other files being followed like changelog.md, so which is more like if any major code is being published, if they want to track some version for what they're doing, then each version they can track like, okay, I'm bumping from 86.1 to 86.2 and why I'm doing this, so that you can have your own standards for your code starting from version, and it's your next code change is that going to be like a major change or a minor change. So those best practices also you can try to incorporate as part of your coding standard. And I know it's not much technical into it, but for all the best practices, this Markdown language is hiding underneath. And again, you can go and check the code part to see like how it is being written. So if you want to do it as an activity, try to go and see all the open source projects which you would be interested in, and see how the documentation has been made and how the pull requests are using the Markdown language to make it a clear-cut instruction to say like what exact changes is going to make the peer review person's work more handy. There is also one more extension which is available for architectural diagram. So because when we are working with concepts of architectural part, then generally people go with create an image from some XYZ location and then they try to keep on updating as a file. Or else there is one more extension called draw.io. So if you see, it says unofficial, but it does its job good. All we want to do is we want to create a file ending with an extension io.png or draw.io.svg based on our use case. So for example, if I do like arc.draw.io.png, then you can directly edit as the architecture diagram, right? So it's more like same of what you would see in the internet. So if you go for draw.io site, you can draw the architecture diagram of like using the components like AWS and stuff. So rather you create it here and then save it as a PNG file and integrate it to your repository. What we can do is we can directly save the file as the extension within our local repository, and you can make the editing part at ease. So for example, if I go for, you see the similar part right over here, and you can do like test and you can play with it, like you can change the color of the background, and all you would need to do is you would just say save. And in the Markdown language, once you commit, you can see I can put an image, right? So if I do this, sorry, so I think this will be this, and it's asked for the alt text. Maybe I will give it as demo, and it's asked for the image URL. So it's going to be arch.drawio.png, and if I view this, you see whatever the diagram is there, it's directly reflecting in our image. So in case if I want to do some modification to it, let's say from test to demo, then it's going to be get reflected in real time. So rather than building our architectural diagram at some XYZ location and each time trying to save it and upload it in a repository, we can try to adapt this extension so that makes our life more easy in terms of documentation part. So I know it's very quicker one, but wanted to share since many people are working on the open source, or like many people are working on the coding part. So it's try to have it as a best practice to document how your architecture is going to look like and what your code base or what your repository does, add it in the readme. So before even you start uploading your first code, try to have this as a best practice for any of your work. So that's mostly for today. Any specific questions?